Keir Starmer tells us over and over that he comes from a struggling working class background. But is it really true? Let's hear what he tells his party members as he sells his story of impoverishment.
Now, some of you have heard this before.
I'll pause there for some of you who like to analyse facial expressions and have noticed the little chuckle he has to himself. He knows what's coming.
I grew up in a pebble-dash semi. Dad was a toolmaker. Mum was a nurse.
Now, I would point out here that by some definitions, nursing is a middle-class profession. I would also point out that his father, whilst being a toolmaker by trade, had his own toolmaking business called the Oxted Tool Company, details of which I give in episode 1, which I'll leave a link to below this video. It is also true he was brought up in a pebble-dash semi, but he talks about it with disdain. So we'd better take a look at that pebble-dash semi. So if we go on to Ancestry and look up Rodney Starmer, Keir's father, on the electoral registers, that will give us the address of the house in Oxted. Then we can look on any of the property valuation sites there are on the internet, and we can see that it was sold for $455,000 in 2020. Rodney, of course, died in 2018, and here is the said property. There are no houses opposite, just hedges and fields and rivers. Did have quite a long back garden, which backed on to fields, which are the fields I assume that were purchased, that they kept their donkeys in, the keeping of which would not have been a cheap endeavour. Now, I'll grant that the house doesn't look as if it's been particularly well maintained externally or internally, but that may well have been a lifestyle choice rather than due to lack of funds. Still, not a bad place for the young Keir to have grown up in, given the countryside setting. But we'd better let Keir Starmer tell us what growing up there was like.
I remember when our phone was cut off because we couldn't pay the bill. How hard it was to make ends meet. It wasn't easy. But there's something else I remember about being working class in the 1970s. Hope.
Gosh, that sounds really horrendous, doesn't it? But wait, here's Keir telling us about the wonderful holidays he had.
So my parents brought us here every single year when we were growing up. They love the Lake District. Yeah. They went on the honeymoon there, and so I've been here so many times.
Curiously, he seems to say, my parents brought it. So I don't know what's going on there. Perhaps he just misspoke, because they stayed in holiday cottages, as he tells us. And here is Keir standing at the place of his childhood holidays. But what about weekends and leisure time? Well, the Starmers had a multi-generational interest in cycling. Rodney Starmer was quite heavily involved with organising cycle races. As we can see from this clip, almost up to the end of his life, and in fact so esteemed was he by the cycling clubs that he's remembered many years after his death, as we can see here. And I include this because Keir Starmer tells us in interviews that his father retreated into himself because of the reaction people had when he told them that he worked in a factory. So the fact that Rodney had organised these events, and in fact other shows as well in the area, seems to be contradictory. The teenage Keir Starmer took part in these time trial events, as so did his sister. And according to various newspaper clips, they had quite good times. And here is the young Keir on his bike. Of course, these would have been very specialised and probably quite expensive cycles. So I'm going to conclude now by saying that the Starmers achieved their aspirations of property ownership, self-employment via a small enterprise, holidays, they could indulge in sports and pastime. I'm going to say that these are middle-class traits, albeit perhaps lower middle class, certainly not working class as viewed through the lens of the 1970s as I knew them. Thanks for watching, thanks for your patience, and feel free to like.